addressing this message to all the peoples of Africa, both in the continent and the diaspora. Fellow citizens of Africa, an illustrious anti-colonialist once said, colonial violence worked to capture the force of desire of the subjugated and channel it into unproductive investment. By claiming to be acting on behalf of the interests of the natives and thus in their stead, the colonial machinery sought not merely to block their desire to live, it aimed to affect and diminish their capacities to consider themselves moral agents. In the last 500 years, Africa and Africans have been subjected to all forms of banality of evil, from enslavement through colonialism and now neo-colonialism. I know you think and believe that all these forms of oppression are old, mundane, and historical relics which must be forgotten. That would be true if you were right. The last 500 years have seen all forms of resistance against these different instruments of oppression defeated, using ethnic cleansing, genocide, and other forms of terror. The African remains dispossessed of their land, no access to capital, and their labor remains very unproductive. While Africa is not homogeneous, there is something very peculiar and common about all of us. We still believe more in our oppressors, everything about them, than we believe in ourselves. This has become the cornerstone and foundation of our system of education, our political systems, the economic doctrine we have adopted, our languages of communication, the musics we listen to, the movies we fancy, even when those movies depict us as villains and our oppressors as saints. This is what Mbembe described as the strategy aimed at diminishing our capacity to consider ourselves moral agents. In Ambazonia, our people have risen to accept their right to true independence, their right to exist as moral dignity and to have a sense of fulfillment as human beings. Cameroon occupied Ambazonia, pillaged it, traumatized its people, treated them as slaves and captives, committed genocide, and insisted that Ambazonians must accept a state of servitude or cease to exist. We have declared that occupation dead and buried. It shall not be managed, transformed, or reformed. It shall be dismantled, and all those who have enabled, benefited at the expense of our people will be held accountable. I thank all of you across the continent who have stood with Ambazonia, and I call on everyone else to join us in ending occupation, torture, and imprisonment. When in 1652, the Dutch boat anchored at Table Bay in what was described as not 250 years later, 4 republics, the Transvaal, Natal, Orange Free State, and Cape Colony, met the Republic of South Africa that continued the dispossession, instituted segregation, and apartheid of Africa. From the shores of Cuba to the training camps in Algeria, we all rose as one people to resist apartheid until it was defeated. We protested, boycotted, produced artifacts to raise money for the ANC. We sang and we showed the world that when we stand together, no force can defeat us. Ambazonia needs that kind of solidarity to help it defeat the fascist and neo-colonial puppets in Cameroon. We aren't only fighting for independence. We are fighting to own the factors of production. We are fighting for the system of education that is revolutionary and transformational. The West operates on a simple assumption that determines their economic and political doctrines. That assumption is called entitlement. Europeans believe that God created the world and endowed it with resources, and that they are entitled to these resources wherever they are. They have occupied the entire globe, settled, colonized, installed puppets to ensure they have access to these resources. We have wasted the last 60 years trying to be pro-West or pro-East, and never for once tried to be pro-African. When IMF funds bankrupt our economies due to a mundane structural adjustment economic model and high interest rate, what do? We become pro-China. When fascism rose in Europe, it was declared a universal threat that everyone, race, continent, and country had to fight against. Our parents went to war from the continent. After the war, a Marshall Plan was put in place to develop the economies of the countries affected. How many African countries or territories benefited from the Marshall Plan? Even Japan and Germany, that were aggressors, were rebelled. A security structure called NATO was established to guarantee security. No African country is a member of NATO. Even Finland, that declared neutrality during the war, benefits from the security architecture of NATO. We have handed our continent and destiny, the fate of an entire race, to people who lack courage to walk out of the cage. Leaders chasing the very masters and systems our forebears died fighting against. Leaders who are good at privatizing the benefits of stupidity and distributing its cost. Leaders who, after 80 years, still believe in the IMF and World Bank. America's debt is $37 trillion, 122% of its GDP. France has a debt to GDP ratio at 101%. Africa's entire debt is $3 trillion. How many times have you heard France asking the IMF to restructure its debt, putting it under a structural adjustment program? Why is America, whose debt is 12 times larger than the debt of an entire continent, still the richest country in the world and still creating value, while we are still chasing and begging a rapacious institution to keep us afloat? Africa needs transformational leaders, revolutionary ideas that will make the moon landing a walk in the park. My fellow Africans, our Freedom's Gate Ambazonia will adopt a simple alternative assumption as the basis of its socio-economic and political transformation. This is the direction Africa must take: self-preservation. Our socio-economic and political doctrine must answer one central question: does this policy, doctrine, or system help in the self-preservation of our peoples, guard against their exploitation, and serve their interests? Our problems are not based on debt. Education is needed. 30% of the US GDP comes from states with the best universities. We have very low productivity, lack of bold and transformational leadership that is necessary to drive this transformation, lack of innovation. To rise and succeed, all countries have had good leadership, patriots who put their people first and fear none, an educational system that produces knowledge, skills, a work ethic development, a people with strong character and civility, innovation and technology. At their peak, when the Dutch guilder was the world's reserve currency, Amsterdam the world's financial capital, the Netherlands produced one quarter of all world's innovation, especially in shipbuilding. As Britain rose and the Netherlands declined, the Brits recruited most experts from the Netherlands to make them the strongest sea power, London the financial capital of the world, and the pounds the world's reserve currency. We have to begin from somewhere. We have to begin from Ambazonia. I call on all Africans to believe in themselves, wherever they may reside, in the United States, across in Asia, in the Middle East. We must believe in Africa. We must believe in our race. And we must create those institutions that will guard against not only the exploitation of our people. God bless you all.
Here is our glory, with the Ambazonia, there's a loyalty. There's a son Savior, O God, us afraid, allergic to thee, O body long job, glory to the glory, right and not to form. Yeah, in the nation, glory, glory, glory to the Father for making nation is on forevermore. Ambazonia, and the freedom, I choose a topic, stash the bush, the most of the endorsement of the nation.
Wow.